It's 4th and 5. Oh, this is it right here. This is it, Coach. 4th and 5.
4th and 5.
Where's Parker at? There you go. Oh, he's gonna do the squiggly.
Yep.
He's gonna do the squiggly.
GetSportsFocus is brought to you by Summit Partners, leaders in growth equity investing. Weightsandbars.com. Build your home gym and shop locally from the Bay Area's best fitness equipment experts. Ike's Love and Sandwiches. Championship level sandwiches every single time. South Bay Construction, a reputation built on trust. And by Fuel Good, fueling your success. Conveniently located in Santa Clara off Homestead Road. For more info, go to fuelgoodmealprep.com.
What's going on, Coach Cordero?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just back to the office.
I like your office. I like how it looks.
Great office.
Hey, there you go.
Shout out to Coach De La Cruz at XEOs for helping us get organized over here.
Very nice, very nice. Well, speaking of Coach De La Cruz, man, he made his debut as a head coach a couple of days ago. I thought that was pretty cool. Obviously, we're here to talk about the GSF Senior All-Star Game, but also some of the things from earlier in the season and the playoffs and all that stuff. But since I have you here, Coach, man, I mean, why don't we start with the All-Star Game, since that's the latest and greatest that just took place?
Yeah, I mean, big shout out to both Coach Harrison and Coach De La Cruz. 10 days is not enough time to kind of get a team to gel and be put together, but they did a great job getting their guys in order and getting things straight. So coming out and putting together a very good product the other day. So I had a great time, great experience, competitive game. I know that was one of the things that from kind of the organizational standpoint is trying to make sure we're getting guys committed, making sure that we were going to have a good football game. And I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, it did. I was happy about it. Obviously there's a lot of work that goes into the backside behind the scenes. And this whole thing didn't just start, December. It started like January last year, Coach. I remember I told you guys, like, hey man, I'm starting to put this thing together. And guess what? I started putting the next one together a couple of weeks ago. So we're ahead of schedule, Coach. We're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, man. I think every year it's going to continue to grow. I think every year that, you're going to get the feedback that you get after the game, and Alf, you do a great job of taking the feedback, bringing it back to the table, and saying, okay, how can we make this thing better? How can we make this thing bigger? How can we reach more people, players, right? So I think, moving forward, right, our area is continuing to grow, having kids from De La Salle, El Cerrito, more kids from the East Bay come on board. And I think by kind of getting those players from over there, we're going to continue to get a good product.
Yeah. No, I mean, 40 schools were represented in this All-Star game. We got Alex Walker all the way from Stockton. He's the farthest one. And I mean, it wasn't easy because, first of all, it was finals week, the last week of school. And so there were several, not even just a few, like there were several guys that couldn't make practice because obviously they care more about their grades, which is great.
Yeah.
But for the guys that actually made it to every single one, I'm going to publish that list on the website. Shout out to those guys because they too went through finals, but they made it to every single practice, and which was, I thought that was pretty cool. And there were guys coming from Berkeley, Tay was from Berkeley, Hamilton was from the East Bay. I mean, they came out, they only missed one, I think, which was a very important final day for them to miss. But yeah, man, it was great to see all the colorful uniforms during practice. And obviously when we had the game, everybody's wearing their school helmets, and I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, no, and what was really cool, like you said, I think the travel time for some of these guys, sometimes during the holidays, especially those freeways can get packed up. So especially the kids coming from Berkeley in the East Bay, making it all the way there for an 8 o'clock practice to then turn around at 10:30, drive home, wake up, and go to school the next day. So just a testament to those guys and their commitment level to the game. Also, it's nice to see kids that want to play, right? At the end of the day, these guys are here to try to get one more in for those that may or may not have one coming up after this. But I think the whole experience was enjoyable for the players as well. It didn't feel like it was a burden for them to have to get to and from. These guys were really excited when they came to practice, and the intensity level kept increasing every single practice.
Yeah, no, it was. Shout out to the coaches too, because we had our coaching staff this year was, I mean, the range was so wide that, we have an NFL guy or former NFL guy, and then we had guys that are barely out of college,
Some that were in college still. Yeah, there was a guy, Carazosa. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah.
He brought his younger brother in who is still active playing in NCAA. So just the range of guys that we had to help. But again, it just goes to show that, there are people that care, that are still willing to give back, especially to the holidays. I think that's the thing that stood out the most, is even with the coaches, didn't have too many guys that were absent. And these guys coming out every single day, taking the time from their families. And again, the holiday seasons are busy. So, shout out to them and their commitment level through the process. And a big thank you to them as well, because this game doesn't happen without coaches.
Yep. And we also had the rain.
We had the rain.
Not just during the game, but during practice, at least half of all the practices were, it was raining and it was cold.
Oh.
So I thought, the way everything worked out in the end, it was perfect. I won't change anything, really.
Absolutely.
We had challenges with the jersey getting there the day before, but for the most part, that worked out. The entire operation was perfectly executed by everyone, coach. So very, very thankful for that.
Absolutely. And one more group of people to shout out to is the parents. Very tough time during the holidays to get the kids to and from places. I know a lot of the seniors, some of them do have licenses and they can drive, but there are a lot of parents that showed up consistently and were there and being very supportive as well. So thank you to the parents to allow, number one, to allow your kids to play in the game. And then number two, being extremely supportive through the process. So shout out to the parents.
The parents. And I got to give a shout out to Mr. Vasquez, because he brought us pizza on day 2. That was pretty cool. So let's talk about the game, coach. It was, as expected, it was going to be a bigger roster. We had stars on the field, like all over.
Absolutely. I think what's good to see, the biggest thing about the game, and I think this was kind of talked about earliest on, was what's going to happen in the trenches. And with the big dogs kind of doing big dog things and the linemen being able to set the tone for the entire game. And I think that with the rain, that allowed for those guys to shine. And I love the skill players. I love putting a lot of points on the board. But as a defensive coach and as a guy that really tries to shed light on our linemen, I think it was actually a really good opportunity for those guys to go out there and grind it out and show and showcase their ability and what they can do when it's put on their shoulders. So both sides, heroes and the 5-star, I think there was a lot of good line play, and I think a lot of guys stood out.
Yeah, no, definitely. Francis Monet, he was the defensive lineman of the game. Teo Casares, he was the defensive player of the game, led both sides in tackles, and he had some really, really important plays at the end right there. And of course, we got to give our offensive lineman of the game to the center, Angelo Garcia from Sequoia. He truly deserves that. I confirmed all these guys with our coaches, and they got the thumb. Shout out to Sean Lathan, though, your big boy.
Yeah, big dog.
He almost got it. He made one really big play. Yeah, and to have him go against Moose, I thought that was that was an excellent move by the D-line coach from Heroes.
Yeah, I think to support what you were talking about with the center play, people often don't think about that position in terms of how important it is. It's like that guy touches the ball every play on offense, and especially in the rain with the conditions, as wet as it was, to be able to keep the ball in the hands and not put it on the ground as much as you would think in a game like that. But shout out to him, Sean. I was actually coming around the sideline as he made a play where he got the sack and a forced fumble. And just to watch him in his element at his purest form, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a big time play, man. And I can't wait to see him at the next level. Speaking of next level, coach, there's a lot of next level guys that didn't even have to play, but ended up playing just because, number one, I think the most important reason for these guys to play was they just love the game and they just want to do it one more time with their friends in an environment where they're free. Because for us, we kind of let the guys loose, like they could celebrate just a little bit, and the rules were a little bit different as well. But what do you think of these are guys that we've seen for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Some of them actually did play for us for our club teams.
Yeah, and first person to shout out Cole Harrison, one of the players that has been with us the last few years. Just his humility and just the way that he conducts himself around players and adults, the same, extremely respectful, great attitude. If you were to talk to him, you would have no idea that he's continuing to play on until you start kind of talking about football. But ultimately, he's a really good kid. And again, it just shows in his humility. Shout out to your parents as well for raising such a good kid. Another one, Moose. He's been coming to our camps over the last series that we started hosting. And again, his work ethic has been unmatched. Every single time we see him, great attitude when it comes to the game. He's always willing to get coached, especially with somebody at that caliber, right? In high school, seeing a kid that's already that developed, still wanting to learn more and continue to develop even more. So, as good as he is right now, I think the sky's the limit for him because of his willingness to be coached and just being open-minded to take on the different challenges that he's going to see. So, again, shout out to Moose. Also, his parents, first parents to get there, last parents to leave.
They were there. They were there the entire practice schedule every single day. Moose's dad was there, and then his mom was also there most of the time. It was great to see. And for me, it's like getting to know some of these parents was, one of the coolest things as well.
Yeah, I think that's, football as it's been kind of going up and down and decline of like enrollment teams. I think especially in the Bay Area, we see that some programs are growing, some programs are not, but even all the way down to the youth. I grew up in a football family in the community, so football is a huge part of my culture. So it is nice to see players at, the future of football is looking good. And it really does. Like I say, it starts with the parents and being extremely supportive of their kids and allowing them to play. And it just shows as they grow up and get older.
I got to give a shout out to Parker, man. Parker 3, he was our QB for 3 years. Watched him at Bellman. He developed, and he had I thought he had a great game. Obviously, these guys were going at it, man. It was a 14-9 final, but the entire game was pretty intense, and it was like everybody was always every single moment in the game was like there's that anticipation of that big play, right?
Parker's a warrior, and that's the kind of guy that you want to have on your team. To where if I have, a second left on the clock, the ball is going to be thrown by him or caught by him or handed to him. If I have him on my side, that's the type of kid that you're going to put the ball in his hands. Again, shout out to his dad. Same type of deal. Almost every practice, all the way through 7-on-7s, being extremely supportive and helping grow the game. But yeah, he did. It's tough. I'm sorry to be mumbling, but it's tough to gel with the team in probably 8 to 10 days with your offensive line and the running backs and whatnot. So being able to have some sort of production in a game like this is a big deal.
Yeah. And then you throw in the rain, makes it even harder. But it was great because it really challenged the guys. And I think a lot of the comments that I got was like, man, this was fun. This was the most I've ever had this entire season. And these are coming from guys that are leaders from their own team. And there's a really good compliment from a few of them. I'm not going to name names, but some of these guys were like, I wish this was my offense. I wish this was my D-line group, or I wish this was my actual team. So I shout out to the coaches for making these guys feel welcome and included. And every time I turned the camera during practice, there was coaching going on. And then nobody was standing around, or I mean, obviously there's always going to be like a couple players talking here and there, but for the most part, man, there's always coaching going on, like every single second of every single practice, which I was totally impressed with.
Yeah, and these guys, again, like I said, just like the players are excited to play, the coaches are out there just as excited to coach. I think there's a piece of it, you get your cleats on. I see Coach Booby Dixon out there had his cleats on running through the drill. As adults, even in my old age at least, it's nice to go out there and tie them up one more time and just go through drills and whatnot. So just having the opportunity to mesh with men that are trying to do the same thing that some of us coaches once did. So I think that's the piece of it is, the game of football is a fraternity. There's only so many, not everybody can play the game of football, especially tackle football. I think that there's some gray area with people that say that they play football or they coach football, and it's sometimes, not to down like 7-on-7 or flag football. Those are great sports for what they are. But the game of tackle football is something special that really is limited to a group of people that are like have gone through some rite of passage to play. And whether you were a superstar or whether you didn't play very much, it doesn't really matter, because if you were able to go through a season of tackle football, there's like something about you that changes, right? There's some learning that you've had within the game. And I think that's a piece that doesn't happen. We can't catch it on camera. And you don't always see it on Friday nights because although we just had an all-star game that showcased the best of the best players, there are guys on each of those teams that work just as hard, equally as hard as some of those guys that we were able to showcase that don't get the camera time, that don't get the love, but, are just as much as part of the game as everybody else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were talking about practice a couple of days prior to the game, and the way I see it is like, there are no second strings. These are all first stringers.
Everybody's a first stringer.
Everybody's a first string. I mean, even if you have your starting offense over there, you're still going against guys that are starters on defense. So there was really no second team or first team. Everybody was a first teamer.
No, and when you get to the level of an all-star game, you have to understand there are always going, and in every athlete in every sport, there's going to be players that are better than you, players that are not as good as you. But when you get to a point of the all-star game, it's a privilege to be there, right? And reps are earned. They're not going to necessarily be equal all the time, but just being a part of the game and being around those type of caliber of players is a privilege in its own. And I think, I believe that when we started the game, this was your goal overall, was to not think about the time that you're going to be playing during the game, but think about the time that you're playing during practice. And that's just a testament to really what the game is, because 90% of the game happens Monday through Thursday during the season. Friday night lights, you got the games going. The coaching and the practicing and the developing happens Monday through Thursday. So that's really where you're being taught. That's really where you're getting better. That's where you're developing. So even with the All-Star game, these guys are still developing during practice time, and then they're able to showcase during the game. But the experience is the entire thing. It's not just the time that they get to hit the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you said it. You hit it right there. What else do we need to talk about as far as the game?
Two-time champion, Coach Harrison.
Yeah, right here. To be honest with you, dude. Okay, there were a lot of challenges during practice. Number one was the finals. It really kind of threw off the scheduling and all that stuff. But during the first week, Coach Harrison's squad was struggling, right? I mean, you could tell like they're struggling with either the line group or the defensive group, but there's always a core there that was there. And but the prediction prior to this game was they might not be able to pull it off, right? Because the Heroes, their attendance was great throughout the entire thing. They were organized.
I think that goes to a testament to the score of the game too. I think you look at the teams, and for the 5-star, there was a lot of representation from the WCal. I know that on the Heroes, you had the representation from Bellarmine and Reardon. But I think the favored team in the game, based on some of the roster, would have been the 5-star coming into the game. But the fact that the Heroes were able to actually play extremely competitively, and it really went down to the last couple of minutes, Alf. It was a 4th and goal situation. Heroes had the ball, down 14-7, and they had 4 down. I think it was the 5-stars went off sides and gave the Heroes 4 downs to get 5.
Yes.
And they were able to stop the Heroes going into that last drive. Had the Heroes scored, it might have been a 14-14 game with a minute and a half left. And, it would have been, it potentially could have been a different story. So again, shout out to both coaching staffs for being able to put together a competitive game. Also, aside from a few flags on the field, there were not a lot of miscues. So, from the discipline stand of it, these kids did a great job staying organized, coaching as well, making sure that the miscues were very limited. There was not a lot of laundry all over the field. So I think that's a testament to, again, the coaches, the players, but also the referees kind of being mindful of understanding that it's an all-star game, letting a little bit go, but also making sure to stay on top of things and keep control of the game. So I think the officiating crew did a very good job as well.
They did. No, they did. They're from the Peninsula Athletic League. That was, that whole crew right there. Big game with some big time players equals big hits. We saw some big time hits.
Some big hits. Luckily, I believe for the most part, everybody made it out of that game safe.
Yes.
I think we had some bumps and bruises, but again, with an all-star game, I think that's one of the things that people have concern, especially with some big-time players, is the risk of injury. But I think that, number one, we had trainers on both sides. The players were taped, stretched, and I think they were ready to go and they were ready to play. So I think the biggest thing is doing the most that we were able to do. I think we did a good job at being preventative with injuries. It also helps to have Coach Andrew on the sideline stretching all the players out beforehand. And then shout out to the trainers that we had for making sure that the kids were taped up before the game. That's huge. Yeah.
It was fun, man.
Can't wait for 2024.
2024, yes. Looking at the dates already, and it's pretty much set. But I think Coach Harrison's going to be back for thirds.
Yeah.
And who knows?
One thing I'll say to the players that are the 24s, 25s, get in the classroom, get your academics right. That was the one thing. And like last year, kept a lot of players off the field. There were a lot of players that were good enough as football players to play into this game, but did not meet the minimum 3.0. So like right now, it's early enough to say, I want to play in this all-star game, get your grades up. Number one thing, get your grades up, 3.0 or higher. Not only will it allow you to play in this game, it's going to open up more doors for you to play at the next level if you're thinking about playing at the college level, because that 3.0 to 3.2, really a 3.3. I would say a 3.3, you are in very good shape to be able to receive scholarships and get more offers. 3.0 or above is our minimum. So really keep that in mind if you want to come out next year, because this game is going to continue to grow and get bigger. And if you want to be able to get in this game, you have to start early and you have to get the grades up early. And it's easy enough to say, but that means to establish better habits going into this new year. So take the new year to get those grades up and continue having that happen, because if the grades stay up, you can get into this game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ooh, there's about over 50 of them that didn't make it. That could have made it.
Solid football players that just didn't Didn't make
Yeah.
the
So I know I talked to Coach Andrew a couple of days, shortly after the game, and one of the things that we talked about was like, man, okay, if you take this roster and if this was a regular school roster, is this either or both? Is this a CCS championship roster?
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think that it has the potential to be a CCS championship roster. One of the reasons because it actually speaks to the academics. If every player on their team is a 3.0 or above, and they were able to start somewhere, that means that they're likely to have been disciplined in everything else. And I think that if you have disciplined players, you're going to win championships, regardless of who you're playing against. Now, talent level, I think the talent level's there. But who knows? I don't know. Trying to think about, okay, so we line them up against who, but some of these players play at certain places. So, but I think, yeah, I mean, it really comes down to like, it's the discipline piece. And if you have the talent, the discipline, and the academics, you're going to have a very good season, regardless of.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, well, that was fun. Well, Coach, I mean, it's been a fun experience, and we're gonna keep it going. We're gonna keep it going, and I know it's moving on to the next season now. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was maybe a little bit of you guys' season this past, because you had a pretty interesting ending.
You had an interesting ending, yeah.
Yeah, but for those of you who don't know, Coach Cordero is the head coach of the Oak Grove Eagles in San Jose. And this was your second year being a head coach, or second
Second year being the head coach at Oak Grove.
So first year was definitely a learning experience. Talk about your second year at Oak Grove. I mean, you had some talents.
We did have some talent. I think that we had the pieces and we had to figure out the recipe. So year one, it was like we had the ingredients, we had the right guys. Second year is we figured out the recipe. And I think what happened was it took us a little longer than we'd have liked to be able to gel and mesh. But ultimately, once we got to week 10, I think we were exactly what I wanted to be kind of getting to the season. So on a positive, I mean, on a negative, we didn't get there in time, but on a positive, we were able to go into our last performance and we were able to execute the way that we liked. And what I mean by that is coming into the season, I wanted to establish the run. I wanted to play defense, and I wanted to throw in a little wrinkle or two. And going into our last game, I think that if you were to look at that last game, you would have seen a team that played really good defense, that was able to establish the run, and that had a little something up their sleeve. So when it comes down to, did we end up where we wanted to be? I think as a team, we developed into the team that we could have been, but that I feel like it kind of got cut short. But again, a lot of things that happened during the season without that last element in terms of like how we landed into our playoff situation or not a playoff situation, we could have done a lot more as a team earlier on to not have been put in that position at all. So I think the learning piece from this year is do not leave it up to anybody else to make the decision on if you are to go or not to go to the postseason. I think that's the biggest thing. The belief is we have to get it done from the jump and we can't wait. So a few things. Jumping into the season, we were missing a few guys for different reasons, but we did not have our full team for the first few preseason games. And I believe that if those guys were available, we would have been in a better position to win. Not to say we were going to put these guys in and we're automatically going to win, but we would have been in a different predicament. With that being said, again, I can take 100% ownership of any coaching that we didn't do or that wasn't done. And I can take the ownership for and accountability for not getting to what we needed to do. But ultimately, if we jump into things with a different approach next year and a different mindset, I don't think we leave it up for anybody else to decide on if we are going to continue into the postseason.
I see. Well,
but let me break it down for you.
Just to clarify things.
So to clarify what happened is we ended up 4-6 overall. Santa Teresa also ended up 4-6 overall. Leland ended up 3-7 overall. We all ended up 2-3 in league play. Now, it ultimately pushed us into a 3-way tie. Our written bylaws stated that we go head to head first. Since it was a 3-way tie, the three of us washed. And then what would happen would be that we would go to common opponents, and none of the three teams had common opponents. Now, the next step we go to is power points, in which Santa Teresa had the most power points. We had the next most power points, and then Leland had the third most power points. So in our bylaw, that kind of was what was written down. And the way that our league decided on breaking the ties is that they would determine the third place team first, and then remove that team and give them one of the vacant playoff spots, the automatic playoff spots. And then they would force a 2-way tie between the remaining teams, in which we lost head to head with Leland. So they broke the second tie over us, which is, again, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. It's the first time that I've actually seen that happen, and it was not clearly written or stated in our bylaws. So it was kind of which didn't seem very ambiguous, turned into a situation to where there had to be interpretation of the rules. So I was notified earlier that week that if we were to end up in that 3-way tie, then that was going to be the situation, is where they would break it twice. And I was told that was in our bylaws. And then on Thursday night, I actually looked at the bylaws, and it did not actually clearly state that, which was why it kind of went to like an email thread and a text thread on, hold on, what's going on? So at the end of the day, we went 4-6. I don't necessarily think that our team should have just advanced to the playoffs anyways, going less than 500. But since we could go to the playoffs, I felt like our team deserved to also go to the playoffs. But at the end of the day, the lesson learned is win more games. I'm not going to sit here and say that we did X, Y, Z, we should go anywhere, because if that were to be the case, we need to win more games. So that's moving forward. We just have to win more.
Yeah.
It also has motivated me this year and lit another fire underneath me this year. So I'm fired up going into this year and making the changes that we need to make. Our players are coming through with a different mindset, and just excited for the next year to play.
Well, it's only the 2nd of January and you're in the weight room, coach. Looks like you've been preparing all night.
Well, we start once we get back from the break. So the boys will be in here once we get back from break, and then from then on, we're going to be getting rolling. So I think this year is going to be a very good year for us. Some changes happened, and so to be determined.
To be determined.
Can't speak too soon.
Can't speak too soon, but all I know is that Oak Grove football needs to get back on it, because the South Bay football is not good football unless Oak Grove football is a good football team.
Dude, we'll be back. Like I said, I think we're on the right path. I think I learned a lot this year. Again, and it being my second year in the program, every single time that I hit this thing running, I'm gonna regroup, and we're gonna reload, and we're gonna get better. So I think that this third year, the seniors will be my freshmen when I came in. So the juniors will be freshmen, and the freshmen from when I coached JV will now be seniors. So I'll now have had the entire program kind of under my umbrella, and again, hopefully that shows this year.
Nice. Any specific player that you kind of want to highlight right off the bat right now? Or I know Ryan is one of them. He's our 7-on-7 QB.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, Ryan is going to be a 3-year starter. He's coming into his senior year. Very athletic, very gifted player, and I think that this year he's finally started to hit his stride, and he only positives from there. Also, Isaac Achika, he was a D lineman of the year for our league, and he's a monster. And I think that, if you're an O lineman or D line, you got to watch out if he's in front of you, because he's hungry. And just watching him develop as a freshman all the way now to what will be his senior year next year, he's going to make a big impact on the league. We have a lot of guys. I don't want to overstate too many guys, but there are a lot of guys coming in that I have high hopes for. And it really what it comes down to is the offseason. If these guys commit to the offseason and we're in here dedicated and we're making sure that we are doing the things that we need to do, I believe that we're going to have a successful season next year and we'll be in the race for a championship.
Sounds like we have a couple of GSF senior all-star in there already. I couldn't hear you there, Coach.
I said absolutely, and like I said, we're I think I'm at the point here, and I think we're at the point here where this year was like a very big emotional bump to our program with how like it ended in the season, how the season ended, and like I'm gonna do everything I can do, and like I said, I'm not looking for a playoff spot this year. I'm looking for a championship. So if our guys get on board, I think we can do that.
Nice. So off season starts now.
Off season starts now. Another shout out to Coach Andrew from XEOs. This will be our second year working with Coach De La Cruz. Again, huge impact that he made into our weight room last year, coming in and like kind of going through baby steps of training these guys on proper form and technique. Also working with him to create workout plans and our weekly routines, stretching routines, nutrition, diet, everything that he's come. Next year we're just going to amp it up a little bit more, and we're going to be in year 2. So I think, again, as the program continues, we're just going to continue to get better.
Nice. No, that's great to hear, Coach. I'm looking forward to the upcoming season. I know it's only January, but it's going to be here in the heartbeat, man. Before you know it, it'll be spring ball, and then it'll be August.
Yeah. I mean, it goes by fast.
It does, man. So from the last couple of years that you've been there, what kind of progress have you made? The program itself, that's not necessarily on the football field, but just behind the scene.
So one of the things earlier this year, which is actually one of the biggest thing that I'm proud of, is that going into the second quarter, our entire varsity team made grades. And not only did we make grades without the need of academic probation. And for us over here, that is, it's not easy to do that. So one of the biggest things was making sure that during that first grading period, after we had come back, that all of the guys were eligible. And that was like one of the things that I really want to stand on. The other thing is now we're starting to get in more pieces to the program, more equipment, more little things, more tools. Again, the weightlifting program last year, first class, I think now we amp that up and we take it to another level. Our bodies are getting bigger. We're getting stronger. I'm actually coaching track this year. So I'm going to be coaching the sprinters over at Oak Grove. And then, again, just continuing to work with our kids and just getting them to be better athletes and to be able to put a better product on the field. But I think that was the biggest thing is the academics. I don't think that can get said enough because that goes from our best player all the way down to the bottom of our depth chart.
Nice. Well, I know with more wins, more interest, more players, younger level players will be more interested in the program. What's the status on like South Bay football right now? I mean, I know football was declining a little bit, but it seems like it's starting to go up again.
Yeah, it is. I think that some of the youth programs are starting to get better numbers. I know that there's a lot more down in like Morgan Hill, that area, Gilroy, they're still big. Hollister's still big. We're trying to grow the youth program also down here. So I think that's going to be one of the things, whether it happens this upcoming fall or the following fall, is developing the youth programs. Because if we don't have youth programs feeding into our programs, then we're going to be starting from square one as freshmen, which is fine because there are a lot of programs that don't have players with a ton of experience. But I just think that it's more beneficial if you start a little bit younger. I don't necessarily think that you need to put them in at 5 years old. But if you have kids playing from middle school on, you'll have a stronger program in high school. And it has to be the right program. I believe that you need the right coaches, you need the right program, you need the right organization.
I know one of the issues that always comes up, like every single time the playoff starts, is like public schools, private schools. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think public schools and private schools should have separate playoffs brackets, or what do you think?
At the end of the day, to be the best, you got to beat the best. If you're going to be the best team, you got to be the best team. With that being said, sure, are there some inequities between private and public? Yes, but there's also inequities between public and public. So coming from the East Side district, there are things that we have that other schools don't have. There's also things that we don't have that other school districts have. So it's not going to be equitable all the way across the board. And I think that people want to split it up when they're given the short end of the stick sometimes, and saying like, oh, we should be split because they might be the first one bumped out. So sure, you can say that they can have their own playoffs, but at the end of the day, the end of the line ends up against the Southern California #1 team, right? So the end of the line for this year, Sarah, the end of the line was going down there, right? So it's just a matter of what's important and prioritizing. If you're a public school team and you want more hardware and more rings, then it's probably at your benefit to not have the private schools in your bracket, right? But at the end of the day, to be the best, you got to be the best. And as of right now, we're all mixed together, so we got to play each other.
Yep. Couple more questions, Coach. We're on a roll here. your thoughts on the state championship format with, I don't know, like 15 divisions, I think 15 or 13. Too many, or just
at this point, it's the equivalent of a college football system. And I think next year the same deal is college football. They're going to have more teams into the bracket to lead to the national championship. And not to take away from the 12 AA state champions. Ultimately, it's a bowl game, and the experience is that players can continue to play for a handful of more games. And the benefit is you get more film if you want to play college, or if you love the game, you get a couple more games. End of the day, there's one state championship in my eyes, and it's the winner of the Open. That's the best team in the state of California. Now, if we're looking at school sizes, we can make arguments about different things, but you can only be one best team.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. You have guys that this graduating class of yours, there's a handful of guys that I'm looking at and I'm like, that's a college player. Sean, Byford. These guys are. Shamar could be. I think he can gray shirt at a JUCO and move on to a 4-year. What are your thoughts on JUCO versus, I don't know, D1, D2? What have you told your guys? Because I know you have some guys that are getting looks right now.
Yeah, it really depends on the individual and what their goals are. From an educator point of view, the way that I look at it for my players is if somebody's willing to pay for you to go to college, take what they're willing to give you to pay for your college. Because at the end of the day, the 0.008% people go to the NFL. But if you graduate and you have a degree, then you're going to be able to be a productive member of society and build a career. Now, not to say that you can't do that, not to say that you're not able to do that without a degree, but it only opens some doors for you, or it actually doesn't shut doors for you. But I think every player is different. I think every player has a different ceiling. I think every player has a different level of motivation to play. Just because somebody passes the eye test doesn't mean that they have internally what it takes to go continue to play to the next level. There's players that are going to need more arms around them and support at schools. So maybe that Division I school might not be the best place for that player. Maybe they need to play at a smaller school that has more supports academically. There's a lot of different factors that go into what it means to be a college football player. And then also now with the portal, there's not as many high school scholarships going out to players in high school. So which is better, going to a junior college, or is it better go to NAIA or a Division III school? But ultimately, I think that, when you see kids playing football as adults, we automatically assume that football is in their future, and that might not always be the case. Vice versa, you look at a kid that doesn't look like much, and football might be in their future. So it's really dependent on the kid. And I want to say that as much as I support our players playing at the next level and try to motivate them to continue playing the game, it's really up to what they want to do. And I think that having that honest conversation with the player and the family of what are the actual goals of this kid that kind of drive which decision is the best decision when it comes down to going to college. So the Division I schools that are the flashiest may not be the best option for a player that, may hit their ceiling after their freshman year and they're going to hate their football experience and they're going to bounce back home. Or if you take a kid that loves the coast and send them to the middle of the country, they're going to get homesick within 6 months. They're going to hate where they're living and they're going to bounce back home. So I think the biggest thing is finding and that's hard as a 17 and 18-year-old kid, is to find out what's important to you and find out what your priorities are. But ultimately, it's the decision is on the kid and the family of where they go. If they want to play at the next level and they have put in enough as like a person and a character, I'm going to jump in behind them and I'm going to give them the best recommendation letter. I'm going to, talk to them and talk them up. If you're in my program and you don't do a lot of work, you're not going to get that from me. So I also think there's that piece of, I'm not going to get in the way of anybody's development, but at the same time, I'm not going to put my own credibility on the line just because I want to send guys off.
Yeah. Now, one more question, Coach. Is there a high school transfer portal?
Is there a high school transfer portal? If there is, I haven't seen it working towards this way. But I think, again, I'm a big believer on allowing for kids to develop where they're like, and at the best place for that kid, whether that's private, public, whether that's, do you go to your home school? Do you go to a different school? There's a lot of different factors. And I think that ultimately comes down to the parents and what their priorities in their family are. I can't tell anybody else how to raise their kid. I have a 5-year-old and I can only kind of influence how my child goes to different schools and does what he does. Everybody has a different situation. So I can't judge, this kid goes from this school to that school. Like if it's in the interest of the kid and it's in the interest of them having the best shot at a future, whether it is academics or if it's athletics, I'm not going to jump in the way. I'm not going to, hate on the kid or the family for making a business decision. Right. And because if I don't live in your household, I can't speak on your business decisions. Now, in terms of a portal, I think that it's different up here than it is in Southern California and some other places. I think that there are schools at certain levels that reach out to kids at different camps and they're coming from out of state, live in different places. But again, it's no different than going to boarding school, right? So if you have the ability to send your kids off, or if you have the financial means to say, I'm going to send him from here all the way over here, if we don't like it, we're going to move you here and move you here, and then that's not my business. I coach at a public school. I coach the kids that show up on my field. And if you show up to Oak Grove, you're getting coached up. If you leave the school, good luck to you. I'm going to coach the next guy up. At the end of the day, I'm looking to replace you.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that question out there. And finally, Coach, who's going to win the Super Bowl? We're only a month away.
We're only a month away. The Dallas Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl.
Oh!
I say that with as much confidence as I could say as a Dallas Cowboys fan.
There you go. There you go. Well, is there anything else important that we haven't talked about, Coach? This is great. Thank you for making the time.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Alf. I think that's all I got so far. We'll wrap up in another couple weeks.
Coach Cordero, everybody. GSF All-Star player, coach. He's the man. You were the director of football operations.
The executive director of football operations.
There you go. And yes, we're gonna be working on year 3. But before that, he's got Oak Grove to take care of, and I got GetSportsFocus to take care of. So stay tuned, everybody. We got some announcements coming up. Cool.